just received the side steps for a Ssangyong Maso 2020. The set is also suitable for the Rexton, just under $400. And it comes with 2 front brackets for either the left hand and the right hand side, and 2 rear brackets. I laid the parts out, that way I know how it comes together. And also you verify that way that you got all the bits and pieces that are supposed to be in the box. There is one part that you will not find in a box, and it's a spacer. I'll talk about that a bit later on. The tools that you require could either be a set of spanners. You can use, if you have sockets and a ratchet, to make the job a little bit simpler and easier. I don't recommend a shifter. It's not good for installation work of this kind. Watching this movie may save you a lot of frustration. And that's it. So let's get stuck into it. For this model, side steps, you don't need any welding or drilling to do. Here are sealed holes. The rubber seals simply come out like this, and the bolts, they will fit into here. If you struggle to find the holes, because there are a few more holes than you actually need, you can take the bracket individually, and the front one approximately where it goes. You move it around and you find the 2 holes that match with the bracket, and then you simply remove those, and that can be done with all the other brackets as well. When you pre-position the bolts into the selected holes, it's easy to lose them in the cavity. And also, once you put the bracket on, intend to put the washers and the nuts on, it'll just disappear. It just doesn't stay in position. And that's why I thought it is important and a good idea to use these plastic washers and push them in such a way that it will retain its position, like this. On the other one, the smaller one, which goes in here, it's better visible how the plastic washer holds the bolt in position. You click it into that hole, and when you put your washer and nuts on, it doesn't disappear, it stays there. The larger bolts are used for the upper holes, and those holes are bigger as well. And just do the same thing all the way through. Just position them with that clip and they stay nicely put. Beautiful. So before we can install the rear bracket, we need to undo the bolt from the stabilizer bracket. The stabilizer bolt is then pushed through the appropriate hole in the rear bracket. The bolt then goes through the lower stabilizer component, which came out when removing the bolt. Then line up the bolt with the original hole from the stabilizer and hand tight the bolt. The second last bracket from the back, you will find there is a gap between the bracket and the hole, and that is where you need the spacer for. So even if you use only one bolt with bracket number 3, it'll still be sufficient, as many of the jewel caps get away completely with it. So the second last bracket, or the rear middle bracket, as it is noted in the instruction, is a bit different than the others. So that's why we need that spacer. And yes, we have a winner. She's on. Just line it up a little bit as we tie it in. Okay, leave it a little bit loose, because otherwise you won't be able to get the board on. Now that the brackets are all in and in position but not tight, it's time to get the board. Before we can install the steps and put it into position, we have to remove all the nuts and the washers. Now position the bolts so that they line up with the brackets. And then we take this step and pre-position it onto the brackets. If the brackets would have been bolted tight against the frame, you would have a problem now, because you need to be able to move the stuff a little bit so that you get the bolts in from the steps, slot them into the provisional long holes. The bolts have all come through, and now we can make some minor adjustments and position the steps properly. It's important that the edge of the rail here runs parallel to the frame all the way down. The outside references are at the end of the back door, so it's overlapping tiny little bit over the end of the door, and at the front it's exactly the same. Now that the brackets are semi-tight, we can add the washers and the nuts. Now that the step bolts are all in and reasonably tight, we do a final check on the alignment of the steps, that this edge runs parallel to the frame. We can now start to tighten the screws properly. First the ones on the steps, and then finally the bracket bolts. So this is the final product. Fully installed, tied up. Happy days. With the solid steel brackets, it should cope with a bit of weight.